Hey guys, Brad from simpleguitar.com here, and thanks for coming back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about what are scales on the guitar. I mean, if you have no musical experience and this is something totally new to you, then understanding what the heck scales are, where they come from, how we use them, this is all kind of foreign, okay? But first of all, I want you to know that in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about music notes on the guitar. If you aren't familiar with music notes at all and how they apply on the guitar, I'm going to do a quick review here. But if you want to dive a bit deeper on that, I have a video about that you should go watch first, and I'll link that at the top of the video right now. So go watch that if you need to, and then come back to this video and it will make more sense to you. If you're still here, I'm going to assume that you're good to go on music notes and how they apply on the guitar. So let's dive into scales. So here's our quick review of notes on the guitar. These are all the notes of the musical alphabet, right? So in all music and on the guitar, there are 12 notes that make up all of Western music. 7 of these notes generally have one name, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And those are called natural notes. The other 5 notes usually have 2 names and are called accidental notes. And those will be A sharp or B flat is one note. C sharp or D flat is one note. D sharp or E flat is a note. F sharp or G flat is the same note. And G sharp or A flat is also a single note. So this pattern repeats going up through the musical alphabet, going up in pitch. So that would be going from A to A sharp to B to C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, so on and so forth. The distance or interval between each of these notes is called a half step, which is the same as going from one fret to the next fret on any string on the guitar, just like this. If I play one fret and I go up to the very next fret, I've moved a half step. If I go back down, I've gone down by a half step, okay? Pretty straightforward, but here is a diagram of all the notes and where they sit on the first 12 frets of the fretboard. So on your 6th string, your open note is E. So if you play your first fret, you're playing F, and then you have F sharp or G flat on the 2nd fret, and then G, and then G sharp or A flat on the 4th fret, and then A on the 5th, and so on and so forth, okay? So the big things to remember are there's only 12 notes in all of Western music. The notes are always in order and repeat in that order as you go up and down. And the name for all these notes is the musical alphabet or the chromatic scale. So what the heck is a scale? Okay, well, a scale is whenever we take a group of notes that follows a defined sequence of intervals. Okay, now the intervals are the spaces between the notes. And a scale will start with a root note and follows a sequence of intervals to give you the other notes of the scale until you get back to the note you started with. At that point, the cycle or sequence of notes would repeat again, and so on and so forth. So the sequence of intervals between all the notes in the scale will actually give us a scale pattern that we can use as a formula to create or identify more scales. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, okay? So let's look at an example of this. Here's our chromatic scale, the musical alphabet, all 12 notes in Western music, okay? Now this collection of notes is a scale in itself. You can start on any note and follow a sequence of intervals of going half step, half step, half step, half step, and just going a half step all the way until you get all the way back to the note that you start on, right? That's why this is called the chromatic scale, okay? Because if you're moving chromatically, you're going from one note to the very next note, okay? You're just moving in half steps. And so this right here, this would be called a scale. It falls under that definition, right? But really, I can take any notes from this to make a scale. We're going to identify the one scale that has been the basis of all Western music for a long time. And so we want to start by finding the major scale. That's what I'm going to show you guys in here today. So let's look at this, the major scale. To make this really easy, we're going to use the C major scale beginning on the note C, because that scale uses only natural notes. There's no accidentals. So the C major scale starts on the note C and is made up of 7 notes. The full scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now here's how that looks. If we have our collection of the musical alphabet, the chromatic scale, I've highlighted the notes of the C major scale. And you can see that when we do the C major scale, we are skipping some notes, right? And so that's creating some different intervals within the scale. So real quick, I'm going to play this really quick so that you can hear how it sounds. Here's C and D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we're back up to another C. Okay, and I can play that going down. Okay, now let's check out the intervals between all of these notes to identify the sequence of intervals or the scale pattern that we can use as a formula for the major scale. Okay, so if we are looking at the C major scale in the context of all 12 musical notes here, I've got the C major scale highlighted. We're going to look at the intervals between these notes. Now, you remember that from one note to the very next note in the musical scale is a half step, okay? But we're not going from C to C sharp here. We're going from C all the way up to D. So if C to C sharp, we have to remember that interval is a half step. And then from C sharp up to D is another half step. So whenever we have two half steps, we're moving that distance. That's called going a whole step, right? Because if you take two halves and put them together, you have a whole. That makes sense, right? And so also that means that the distance between D and E is also a whole step. But between E and F, we have a half step. Between F and G, we have a whole step. Between G and A, we have another whole step. Between A and B, we have a whole step. And then between B and C, we have a half step. Now, to make this easier to look at, let's remove all the notes in between and the boxes just for simplicity's sake, okay? Even still, the intervals between all of these notes remain the same as before, even though we're not showing them. So we'll have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C here. And then the distances is still going to be a whole step and a whole step and a half step and a whole step and a whole step and a whole step and a half step. Okay, so here I'm just using W's for whole steps and H's for half steps. But that right there gives you the base structure for the C major scale. And we can look at that whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step interval pattern, the sequence of intervals between the notes, and we can use that. It's really cool. So let's keep going with this. Now, this is cool that this gives us the C major scale, but what's more important is that the interval pattern between the notes gives us what's called the major scale formula, meaning we can take this pattern of starting on a note and then moving up a whole step and then another whole step and then a half step and then a whole step and a whole step and a whole step and a final half step by going through the formula and can get any major scale from any starting note. So if we look at the notes as scale degrees, meaning the first note of the scale, second note of the scale, etc., through the seventh note of the scale, it'll look like this. Okay, so we would have the first note, and then we do a whole step to get to the second note, and a whole step to get to the third note, and then a half step to get to the fourth note. Okay. Now here's the trick. We're going to look at this actually on the guitar. There's lots of different places that you can play this, but I'm going to start this on the 5th string, 3rd fret, and base this off of a 3-note per string scale shape. Now you can do this easily. You could do this starting on an open string, and you could do this along a single string. In fact, that's a really good thing to do, and you should practice that. You should do your major scale on that, but just for the sake of ease, we're going to start here on your 5th string, 3rd fret, which is a C note, and then we're going to do 3 notes per string as we go through this. Okay, so there's C and D and E and F and G and A and B and C. And that is our first octave of that, okay? So if I play that, that's exactly what I played before. I've got C on my 5th string, 3rd fret, and then D on the 5th fret, and then E on the 7th, and then F on my 4th string, 3rd fret, and then G on the 5th fret, and then A on the 7th fret, and then B on the 3rd string on the 4th fret, and then C on the 5th fret. Pretty cool, right? So once I know the notes of the scale, I need to find a way to play them actually on the guitar. And there are lots of different ways to play scales on the guitar, and we'll go over more of those in future videos. But the point of this lesson is to show you more how scales are built and how to find the notes of different scales. So we will go a little bit more in depth in playing the C major scale or the major scale and doing it different ways and playing it on more strings and in different places as well. But let's go back to this. Let's go back to our major scale formula here, okay? Now, once we have the major scale formula of whole step, half step, whole step, half step, we can use that to find the notes to any major scale in any key, which means if we start on any note and follow that formula, we can find any major scale. So let's actually do this once here to show you how it's done. And then I recommend that you go write this out yourself for other keys. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks I learned too. We're going to do this starting from our G note and find the G major scale. So we're going to use the formula at the top, right? So our first note and then a whole step to the second note, a whole step to the third note. And we're going to start on G, find the notes of the G major scale. So let's bring back our musical alphabet to help so that we can have that for a reference. Now, here's a cool little trick that you can use when spelling out these scales. That's what this is called when you're finding the notes of the scale. It's called spelling the scale. Each letter of the alphabet is going to appear in the scale one time. So typically we are not going to have like a G and then a G sharp in the same scale. That's not normal, especially in the major scale. Each letter of the alphabet will appear one time. We have 7 notes and we have 7 natural notes. And so we're going to use each of these only one time. So what you can do when starting out is actually start on the note you're going to start on and then write out the rest of the notes of the alphabet like this to act as placeholders. So I've got my G and then I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now what we're going to do is check our formula against the notes that we wrote down and adjust it as needed to make the intervals what they need to be. So here's what we look at first. Okay, our first note is G, and then the second note is going to be A, right? So is the interval between G and A whole step? So if you look at the musical alphabet above, I highlighted G and I highlighted A. And if we go from G up to G sharp, that's a half step. And then from G sharp up to A, that's another half step. And so, yes, that is a whole step, right? So we're good to go. A is part of the scale. That follows the formula. Now, the next note we wrote down is B. Is the interval between A and B a whole step? So I highlighted it up above here too. If you look on the left side, we have A and then up to A sharp is a half step. And then from A sharp up to B is another half step. So that means between A and B, we have a whole step. So we are good to go. So far, our notes of the scale are G, A, and B, and we're doing good. Now, the next note is C. So we put down C to hold the place, and between B and C, we need to have a half step according to our formula. And so is the interval between B and C a half step? Yep, it is. So we're still doing good. We're still rocking and rolling here. Now we go to D. Is the interval between C and D a whole step like it should be in the formula? And the answer there again is yes, it still is. So we're still doing good. Now on to E. We need a whole step between D and E. So is the distance between D and E a whole step like in the formula? And yes, it is. Because we go from D up to D sharp and then from D sharp to E, that makes it a whole step. Now for F. Okay, here's where we're going to get a little bit tricky. We need a whole step between E and F. So is the interval between E and F a whole step like we need in the formula? No, the interval between E and F is a half step. But we need to make it a whole step, but we still have to use F as the base. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up another half step from F and make that note F sharp because we're going higher, so it's F sharp. So F sharp will be the 7th note of the G major scale, okay? Ta-da! And now for the final note, we are back to G, but we want to make sure that the interval between F sharp and G is a half step like we see in the formula. Is it? Yes, it is. So the distance between F sharp and G is a half step. So now we have the G major scale all put together using the major scale formula. Now, check this out. This is the G major scale on the guitar, starting on the sixth string, third fret, following a 3-note per string pattern. So I'm playing 3 notes of the scale and then moving on to the next string to continue with the notes of that scale. There's G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. And if I play it, it sounds like this. Piece of cake, right? Now, we only covered one scale today, but there are many more that we can cover and will in other videos. But this is to help you understand where the heck scales even come from and how they start to apply on the guitar. Just for fun, I'm going to show you the formulas for some other 7-note scales right now. And if you want to, you can pause, copy these down, go find and spell out some scales, and then explore your fretboard to find them all. I mean, you are more than welcome to do that because, like I said, we did the C major scale today and we did the G major scale. I recommend that you go find and write out and then play on your guitar all the other major scales that you can find, right? Start on any fret on your sixth string or on your fifth string and find the major scale from there and write down what the notes of those are. Okay. But here are some other formulas for other scales that if you want to get really adventurous, you can pause, you can write these down, go check them out. Okay, so we have the minor scale, the Mixolydian scale, the Lydian scale, the Phrygian scale, the Dorian scale, and the Locrian scale. Now, if you're not feeling too adventurous, we will cover these in future videos, so you don't have to worry too much about that. We are going to go through this stuff. But if you're feeling really adventurous and you want to go through and do it on your own, that's cool. Go right ahead. All right, guys. So I hope that that was helpful for you. I hope that that adds a little bit of clarity to where scales come from on the guitar and how they work a little bit. This is something that when I first learned scales, it was more like, okay, here's a block of notes. I need to play this block of notes. But when you understand a little bit more about how these scales work and how to find them, that it's built off of these intervals and it's not mysterious. There's no great secret here. It's just simple patterns. That's one of the beautiful things about the guitar is these patterns, especially for scales and chords and arpeggios and stuff like that, are extremely visual. When for like the saxophone or the piano or the trumpet, the pattern for scales and stuff isn't as readily visible or easy to look at like it is here. So that's one of the cool things that we get to do as guitar players is we get to have this really cool visual patterns for these scales that we can use and we can move them around and we can have all sorts of fun. So I want you to go have fun with that. Go play your major scale, go find it, go spell it out. And then we are going to use this scale in future videos and we're going to start building chords off of it and doing other things and having all sorts of fun because like I said, this major scale that we did today is kind of the basis of most Western music. And so everything else is kind of built off of this and refers back to the major scale as home base. And so everything we do will reference this. So have fun with that, guys. And also, if you haven't already gotten it, you can go get your free guide on the top 10 things to learn on guitar first. All you have to do is go to simpleguitar.com/top10 and you can download that for free. It's got 10 things in there, which are 10 of the things that I like to teach beginners right off the bat to get them a lot of fun and a lot of bang for their buck with their playing so that they are doing musical fun things right off the bat. So go download that, have fun with it, have fun with the major scale. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Thanks for liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me. You guys are awesome. So I will catch you in the next video.